بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. So we left off talking about Maryam alayha salam, where Maryam came to she was visited by the angels, is where we left off. And we see that we left off that Jibreel told her that she would have a child while no man, and she says, while no man has touched me, how can I have a child without the conventional means? And Jibreel, it's mentioned in the Quran that the Jibreel says, the matter is, as I have said, your Lord said, such a thing is easy for me. We shall do this, among other reasons, so that we may make it a sign for mankind to know our power. And we see that even some things which seem impossible to be accomplished, yet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is easy. And we have to trust in Allah to solve our problems over. He can help us overcome our hardships, even make things which seem impossible to take place. He can make them happen. We have to call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, place our trust in Him, rather than thinking what is possible or what is impossible to take place. A lot of times, something we think is impossible is anything is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now look at Ibrahim and Sarah have child in old age. We see Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam, child in old age. These things also seemed impossible. Now we see that Maryam has a child without a father. We also see that Adam alayhi salam was created from nothing, be and it is. So the author says, Mary was hailed and congratulated by delegations of angels. They told her, Ya Maryam, Allah gives you the good news of a word from Him, whose name is the Messiah, Isa, son of Mary, distinguished in this world and hereafter, and one of those close to Allah. They called Isa Allah's word because he was created not through the natural systems Allah has ordained for the conception for all other living creatures, but merely by the will of Allah, symbolized by a single word, be, when we say be, and it is. And they called him Messiah because he was blessed and a source of much goodness. The angels continued saying, and he will speak to the people while in the cradle and as an adult, just the same, and he will be among the righteous. And Allah will teach him the law and the wisdom, and in particular the Torah and the Injil. And he will be a messenger to Bani Israel. So Maryam felt intense gratitude, immense gratitude to Allah for honoring her to bestow this child on her. So he says she devoted herself ever more diligently to worship as her child grew in her womb. When she had borne him for nearly 6 months, she felt the time was nearing for her to give birth. At the behest of the angels, she slipped out of the temple unbeknownst to anyone and withdrew to a distant place. Allah carried her miraculously more than 530 miles due east to the outskirts of Kufa, to a place that later became known as Karbala. So we see this has happened before. We mentioned in the Quran that those close to Allah can traverse space and time differently than others. We saw that the successor to Suleiman, Asif ibn Barkhia, brought the throne from Bilqis before the blink of an eye. So this has also happened in the case of Maryam, and we have many narrations about this, which we will read. It says here that we have different narrations just to bring a point, that it says here that she bore him for 6 months, and then gave birth to him after 6 months. There's also narrations that say that she delivered after 6 months, and the same thing is the case with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that there were 6 months and 6 months. Also, some narrations say that it's Nabi Yahya and Imam Hussein is 6 months, those two. We also have narration that says Isa alayhi salam was Maryam bore him for when the angel gave the news to Maryam that it was 9 hours, that the miraculous birth happened after 9 hours, and each one of those hours was as if it was a month, and that she gave birth right away after 9 hours in that place. So different narrations, Allah knows best, but we do know that he was miraculously born. And it says here, I will read the commentary about this, about traveling to Karbala, because the Quran says in a distant place in Surah 19, ayah 22. So the Quran only tells us that she withdrew to a distant place. One tradition tells us the place was Bethlehem. While this tradition concurs with the New Testament, at 6 miles is not very distant place. More importantly, it is contradicted by many traditions that tell us that she gave birth around Kufa. A close examination of these traditions shows that they are all in agreement. One says explicitly that she traveled from Syria, which includes Jerusalem, to Karbala, where she gave birth at the place where Imam Hussein alayhi salam is now buried. This tradition not only is the most explicit in specifying the exact location of Isa's birth, but it also clearly states that her journey was miraculous. She was able, through Allah's power, to travel there and back in less than a day for each part of the trip. And she returned to Syria the very night she gave birth. Second tradition says vaguely that she gave birth next to the Farat, or Euphrates. While the Farat does pass through parts of Syria, it does not pass near Bethlehem, but it does pass through Karbala. Third tradition tells of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam seeking out a date palm among the orchards of Kufa and then praying next to one in particular. He then explains to his companions that it is by Allah, the very tree about which Allah has said, shake the trunk of the date palm toward yourself and it will drop freshly picked dates on you. We can safely guess either that the transmitter referred to Karbala as Kufa because it is on the outskirts of Kufa, or that the palm the Imam prayed near was a descendant or a graft from the original palm in Karbala. Another narration says that speaks of Imam Ali's visit to Baratha, which is today part of Baghdad. While this tradition speaks of a spring that bubbled forth for Maryam, it does not explicitly refer to Isa's birth, but rather refers to Baratha as Maryam's home. I believe this tradition has nothing to do with Isa's birth and is rather speaking of another place that Imam Ali had excavated, which was Maryam's home, perhaps at some later time in life. The last one, fifth and sixth tradition, explain that the verse, we made the son of Mary and his mother a sign, and we sheltered them on a plateau with a place to stay and fresh water. This is Surah 23, ayat 50, refers to Najaf and the Farat. It is possible that this verse is referring to the time of Isa's birth. However, considering that it says that they were sheltered there, it seems it is referring to a longer stay than a few hours they would have spent following his birth. So we do have many narrations that say that Maryam traversed miraculously to a distant place, which is mentioned in the Quran. And when we go to the specifics, to the narrations, we see that that distant place is Karbala. Her labor pains started it says, in the barren wasteland, she saw no shelter. There was only the emaciated trunk of a date palm, still standing, but barely showing no signs of life. As she approached it, a shout of pain forced her to the ground at its base. She exclaimed, "I wish I had died before this and become a thing forgotten beyond recall." And it was not the pain that made her speak so, it was the thought of what would happen after she had delivered. She was a chaste woman, righteous woman from a good family. She was about to bear a child, which, according to them, would have been out of wedlock. And all she had to defend herself against her people's backbiting and accusations was her word. And she knew it would stand for little under the circumstances. Of course, she knew Allah was her protector, but she did not know what plan He had in store. So imagine her going to these people and showing up with a baby and saying, it's my baby, I gave birth, and it doesn't have a father, and Allah made it miraculous, and everyone's going to be like, yeah, okay, you know, sure, whatever you say, we don't, they're not going to believe it and say, they're going to accuse her of doing inappropriate things. Na'udhu billah. And she was worried, like, how can I address this situation and fix it? There in the barren plain of Karbala, with no one to help her or even to hear her cries, without even the shade of a tree, on Tuesday, the 25th of Dhul Qa'dah, Maryam gave birth. So this is mentioned also. I read some narrations about the birth of Isa alayhi salam, and said was on 25th of Dhul Qa'dah, not the 25th of December. It says, from the ground where he lay, Isa, son of Mary, called out to his mother with strength and comfort, saying, "Do not worry, your Lord has made a spring to flow at your feet. Shake the trunk of the date palm toward yourself, and it will drop fresh dates upon you. Eat, drink, and be comforted." So, subhanAllah, miracles right away, that she was provided with what she needed, the spring from beneath her feet, dates to give her nourishment. And we see that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa he says, when a woman gives birth, the first thing that she should eat is a sweet, fresh, half-ripe date or a ripe date. If there were anything better than this, Allah the Exalted would have given it to Maryam when Isa alayhi salam was born. So, being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this to give to Maryam, because Maryam received winter fruits in summer and summer fruits in winter, and Allah provided her with fruits out of season. Allah could have given her anything at this time, but He chose to give her dates. So that was the first thing that she ate after she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam. So Prophet said, when a woman gives birth, this is one of the recommended things to eat. So she recognized her son's words as a sign of Allah. No sooner had he spoken than she heard the gurgling of water and felt the cool freshness bubbling between her toes. She reached out and cupped the water in her hands and quenched her parched tongue. She washed away the dust and felt as though she were imbibing life itself. She cleansed and bathed herself. She bathed her child and swaddled him in what she could spare of her own clothing. Then she reached out to the lifeless palm trunk and shook it feebly. In an instant, it sprang to life. It sprouted long, verdant fronds that cast a cool shade over her, and tremendous clusters of ripened dates hung low and glistened as their sticky syrup seeped out in the golden halos around each plump fruit. Some of these landed with a thump beside her, and she ate and regained her strength. She now felt at ease with renewed physical strength, and most importantly, a renewed surety in Allah's promise and grace. Allah, who provided all this, would never forsake her. And we have to know and trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always provide for us. She's in the middle of the desert with no one to help her deliver a child, no food, no drink, no nothing. But Allah provided for her, gave her good delivery, gave her food to eat, gave her a spring, a natural spring, even allowed her baby to talk to her, to comfort her. And we see Allah is the best of providers. Inna Allah khayr razaqeen. Allah is the best of providers, al-Razaq. So in the meantime, all this was going on. Shaitan was informed by his spies that a child had been born, because of whom every idol would fall prostrate. He searched the east, and he searched the west, finally found him and his mother surrounded by angels. They kept him at bay. Shaitan asked who his father was. When the angels told him that he was created like Adam had been created, he swore that he would misguide 4/5 of all humanity through him. He knew that such a miraculous birth could easily be twisted to make people think that he is divine. And we see that Shaitan has misled many people through this miraculous birth of Isa alayhi salam, and that people consider him, na'udhu billah, son of God. Some consider him as God himself, astaghfirullah. And he has deceived many people into thinking this. Maryam rose with her baby and she was ready to go back to her home. Isa alayhi salam spoke to her again and told her, if you see anyone, say, I make a vow to Ar-Rahman, the most gracious, to maintain a silence. So this type of vow of silence was allowed for Maryam, and maybe in the Jewish law it was permitted, but however, in Islamic law, according to the traditions of Prophet during his time, all the way to the end of time, and this type of vow is not permitted, the vow of silence. And so she says, and so I shall not speak to any person today. With this, he set her mind at ease. She would not have to speak. She was relieved of the duty of defending herself. He would somehow defend her. So Isa alayhi salam says, don't speak to anyone. I will take care of it. Imagine, small, brand new baby just born, talking and with, coherent and wisdom and all these type of words. It says, as easily as Allah had carried her to Karbala, he returned her along with Isa alayhi salam. On the very evening of her delivery, she found herself on the outskirts of Jerusalem, walking somberly towards the temple with Isa in her hands. At first, people looked at her with their usual greetings. As their gazes fell upon the child in her arms, they glanced like confused at each other, wondering whose baby is Maryam carrying. In her wake, people wondered, they started turning to bad thoughts. And this is the thing. Sometimes we see something, and then the first thing, we're like, confused. And then our mind starts to wonder, and we start making all sort of crazy scenarios. What if this happened? What if that happened? And these things like this. So they started coming up with these bad ideas. Reminds me of this moral story that one of my teachers told me. He said there was this guy, and he was a butcher, and he used to sell the meat, and he would on Fridays he would cut the meat, take the best piece for himself, and then he would go to the store and he would buy 2 bottles of wine. And then he would go get lady, prostitute lady, take her and go somewhere. So everyone started talking. If you see this, you would also think the same thing. Say the guy is like, he doesn't want to give us the good meat. He's keeping it for himself. Oh man, it's Friday. The guy went and bought 2 bottles of wine and got this lady, and they went somewhere, and then the mind wanders and start accusing of a lot of things because it doesn't look good. But my teacher told me the reality, what happened was he had an older mother who was sick. So he took the meat that was most tender because she couldn't chew the other meat, and this was the only type of the piece of meat that she could eat. He would cook it and feed it to his mother. He would go buy 2 bottles of wine, but he would pour them out so 2 people could, 2 bottles of wine would be gone and no one could buy them and use them and become intoxicated. He hired the lady for 1 hour. He paid her, but he talked to her about Islam and akhlaq and taught her not Islam, religion. I don't know what time period this story was in, but could have been about Islam or religion of Allah. So he went and just taught her about religion for 1 hour. You see how things looked one way, but the reality of them could be something else. So this happens when we see people do something. We shouldn't just judge them right away. We should make excuse for them, or at least wait to see the reality of what it is before accusing them and telling other people all sort of things. So everyone is looking at Maryam with his baby, thinking a lot of crazy thoughts because it didn't look good for her. So they started wondering. By the time they collectively realized the scandal of it all, Mary had reached the temple and an eager mob had gathered. With self-righteousness and feigned indignation, they berated her, saying, "Ya Maryam, you have done something novel, O sister of Harun. Your father was not a bad person, nor was your mother an adulteress." With cutting sarcasm, they told her that she was a pioneer of sin in a family renowned for chastity. In reality, they cherished the opportunity to tear down Imran's family and Zachariah's ward. The people became increasingly impatient with what they viewed as Maryam's impudence. She refused to talk. They were accusing her of fornication, yet she did not speak a word in her own defense. So it's still not looking good. She's not even defending herself. When all had gathered around and the indictments had reached the very height of it, Maryam simply pointed at the child in her arms as if to refer everyone's address to him, talk to him. They demanded, how can we speak to one who's yet, an infant in his cradle? How can we talk to this baby? Then he spoke. Imagine the faces of everyone at that moment. Maryam's son Isa alayhi salam, an infant swaddled in his mother's arms, spoke to them as a grown man would speak. He said with eloquent voice, and he announced so all that could hear him, he said, "I am a servant of Allah. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. He has made me blessed wherever I may be, and he has exhorted me to pray and give charity as long as I live, and to be good to my mother, and he has not made me a miserable tyrant to her. May Allah's peace be on me, be with me the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I am raised to life again." So this is one of the miracles of Isa alayhi salam. This is not mentioned in Bible, by the way. We have this miracle recorded with us in Quran, but Bible doesn't mention this. But when you mention to Christians, they don't usually deny it, but they find it interesting. We have narration that it's reported that a Jewish person came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked him a question. He said, "Ya Muhammad, were you, according to the mother of the book, a prophet before you were created?" He said, "Yes." He said, "And were these your faithful companions with you before you were created?" He answered, "Yes." He said, "What was the matter with you that you did not speak wisdom when you came out of your mother's womb, like Isa, son of Maryam? He spoke, as you claim, while you were a prophet before that." The prophet answered, "Verily, my affair was not like the affair of Isa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Isa ibn Maryam, of a mother without any father, just as he created Adam without a father or a mother. And if Isa did not speak wisdom when he came out of his mother's womb, there would not have been any excuse for his mother before the people, because she had brought him without a father, and the people would take her as they do those women who had married outside of the law. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made his speech as an excuse for his mother. So the circumstance was there that he needed to speak, and this is one of his miracles, and it exonerated Maryam from any wrongdoing. So it was because of circumstance. it said when Isa finished speaking, there was absolute silence. People were overwhelmed, filled with awe and wonder and a renewed faith in Allah's power. Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam and his infant Yahya rejoiced to have witnessed the fulfillment of Imran's prophecy. Others were very sorely disappointed. Those who despised Allah's prophets and had leveled false allegations at Maryam and were prepared moments ago to have her stoned for fornication, they now found themselves, tongue-tied or unable to answer. So just a moment ago, they were ready to attack Maryam for the things that she was saying and the things that they assumed that she did. They were ready to attack her and bring the punishment down on her and to even kill her. And now they saw the reality of what happened, and now they felt remorse and newfound faith in Allah, that something that they thought would be impossible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it possible by his will. Not even any doubt remained after Isa alayhi salam spoke to them. So sometime after that, when things had settled down in Jerusalem, a delegation of Zoroastrians arrived and sought out the house of Maryam. They requested to meet with her. They addressed her as follows: "We are a people who gaze at the stars. When your son was born, one of the stars of dominion appeared in the sky. We examined it closely and found that his dominion is to be the dominion of prophethood, and that it will never part from him until he is raised into the heavens, where he will be in the proximity of Allah as long as the world remains as it is. Then he will enter a dominion that is longer and more lasting than that in which he had previously lived. We have traveled from a place in the east until we reached this place, where we found the star to be shining directly overhead. This is how we knew where he was. We have brought presents for him as a means to become close to him. No one has ever been given such gifts as these. We chose these gifts because each resembles him in some way. They are gold, myrrh, and frankincense. We bring gold because it is the leader of all the commodities, and similarly, your son will be the leader of all people as long as he lives. We bring myrrh because it is healing for the wounds, and similarly, through your son, Allah will cure wounds, diseases, insanity, and all ailments. And we bring frankincense because its smoke rises into the sky like nothing else. And similarly, Allah shall raise your son into the heavens like no other contemporary. So this is mentioned in the narrations, and these are the gifts that these people came and brought towards Isa. In Bible, they call them 3 wise men. So we also have in narrations. After his first divinely inspired words, Isa, the infant, spoke no more. On the 7th day, it says that his umbilical cord fell, and for the next 2 years, Zachariah continued his lifelong mission to guide Bani Israel and root out the corruption in the society. With his son Yahya, from a very young age, he demonstrated intense devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his son Yahya, John, he watched his father and the other priests at the temple, wearing their simple attire of we call it labas taqwa, the clothing of the servant of God, or the scholar, or the man of God, we can say. So he saw them wearing this. Similarly, someone is growing up and seeing their father wearing a mama and Saya and Abba, for example. So he saw these priests and everyone wearing these clothing, worshiping with selfless devotion. He went back and asked his mother, "Please sew and make me one so that I can go to the temple and I can worship with the priests too." It's like his son going and saying, tell his mother, "Buy me dish dasha so that I can go and I can go pray in masjid with my dishdasha like the other people. So his mother said, let's wait until the Prophet of Allah returns so that I may consult with him on this. When Zakaria alayhi salam returned, she told him what Yahya asked her. Zakaria asked Yahya alayhi salam, why do you wish to join us in the temple? You are just a small boy. He's like, why do you want to come and pray and worship and do all of these things with us? Most of the young boys, they want to go play and do other things, but you want to come to masjid. Yahya replied, Father, have you not seen boys who are younger than I, who have tasted death? Subhanallah, at such a young age, remembering death. John or Yahya had, deeply understood the shortness of life, the imminence of death, and wished he didn't want to waste any time. He felt that he would die without having the chance to go worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as he should, or as much as he could. Without further discussion, Zakaria alayhi salam turned to his wife and asked her to, fulfill his request and make him this labas taqwa, for example. So we get from this that we have to encourage our children to learn from a young age, as they can reach great accomplishments rather than to waste time waiting. Let them develop the love of the Holy Quran instead of waiting to start when you think they are ready. A lot of time we wait and say they don't understand these things, let them go play and do other things. There is a time for play, but we should start with them very young, getting them to develop a love of Quran, a love of riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Sometimes we ourselves, we think that they're not ready. We say we should wait until they're older. This is a bad idea. We need to start from early as possible. And when we take a look at one of the late Maraja who passed away recently, maybe last year or I think last year, who was in Qom, the late Maraja Sayyid Sadiq Rouhani. He was a student of Sayyid al-Khawi, and he got ijtihad from Sayyid al-Khawi at the age of 14 years old. Imagine ijtihad, how many decades people study, 40 years, 50 years to gaining ijtihad, but he was able to accomplish ijtihad at the age of 14. And Sayyid al-Khawi did not give ijtihad to like so many people. There's only selected people. I think he was able to get it at 14 years old, and he announced his marja'iyah after the death of Ayatollah Hussein Borojardi. When Sayyid Rouhani was age 35, he became marja. Most people had not even got ijtihad at age 35, let alone becoming marja taqlid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him for all of his works and efforts that he did in this life, and get the reward in the hereafter and be close to Ahlul Bayt alayhi wassalam. So we learn from Yahya not to waste time. Take advantage of the time. We have to be ready. A lot of times we see in the airport, you're waiting for the flight, you're looking at the board, I don't want to miss my flight. The door is going to close soon, and we're looking which door to go, which gate, and we're running and we're frantic. We don't even realize anything else that's going on around us. And this is, we should think of death like this, the hereafter like this. I don't want to miss my trip there. I don't want to get distracted. I need to get to my destination. I need to do all the things I need to do to get there. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to miss it. The life is short. So we need to take advantage of it. Yahya alayhi salam devoted all his waking moments to worshiping Allah. He wept endlessly and grew weak, emaciated, until his cheekbones protruded painfully through his skin. The priests expressed their concern for Yahya's health to Zakaria. Zakaria asked him why he wept so much. and said, I asked Allah to give me a son to make me happy. Yahya replied softly, Father, you are the one who taught me to weep so much. Zechariah was surprised by this and he said, When did I say such a thing? Yahya said, Did you not say between heaven and hell there is a bridge which no one may cross except those who weep out of fear of Allah? How the taqwa of Yahya. Zechariah admitted that he had and that it was true. From then on, Zechariah made sure that when he mentioned hellfire, Yahya was not in earshot, for he was more sensitive to the fear of Allah than anyone else. It reminds me the speech that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam gave about taqwa. When he gave this speech about taqwa, this person kept asking him, tell me more, tell me more. And he said, I don't think you can handle, I don't want to burden you with this, because when I tell you, you need to, follow these things and implement these things, I don't want to give you too much. I think it's too heavy. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And he kept going and going. Tell me more, tell me more. And then when the Imam finished, the guy fell over and died for fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to his taqwa. So Zechariah said, I don't want to mention hellfire around Yahya because he fears Allah so much. The wife of Zechariah begged Yahya to return home with them, and after much talking to him and this thing, he agreed. So she brought him back to health, nursed him to health, fed him, and then one day as he slept, Allah spoke to Yahya in a dream and said, have you found a home that is better than mine? Yahya got up from his sleep. Right away, he asked his mother to give him his clothes, that his labasa taqwa, his abad, his saya, and these type of things that they wore, equivalent to these. And he rushed off to the temple. His mother didn't want him, she asked him if he could stay, and he insisted that he had no choice. And Zechariah alayhi salam saw in his eyes that he had saw a vision from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he convinced his wife to let her son go, to let Yahya go. So he told her he has been shown something in his heart that will prevent him from ever partaking in the pleasures of this worldly life. Subhanallah. So this is about Yahya alayhi salam. And he says, when Zechariah passed away, his son Yahya, though still a child and only slightly older than Isa, donned the mantle of nubuwwah, or prophethood, and continued his father's mission. Allah made him wise despite his youth, and he was compassionate, pure, God-fearing, and good to his parents. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed him, saying, Yahya, hold fast to the book of Musa. He would address the Bani Israel, praising Allah and warning them about the day of judgment, reminding them that the plight of the Bani Israel was due to their many sins that they had committed, which is the plight of all people, that they are suffering and going through many things that we see in the world today is because of the sins of people. They turned away from the path of Rasulullah. They turned away from the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So he is telling them that they are suffering because of the many sins that they have done, and they need to do tawbah and istighfar. He promised that they would be delivered at the hands of Isa, the Messiah, who would rise up in some 20 years from then. So this is the mission of Yahya alayhi salam, and he was the one who foretold the coming of Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam, and inshallah we will see what happens more with Yahya and Isa alayhi salam next week, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli.